Namaste and pranams to one and all. Welcome to yet another session of Conversations on Consciousness. In today's segment, we are happy to introduce our guest, Shri Swami Ishwarananda Ji Maharaj. Namaste and pranam Swamiji. We welcome you to this session on Conversations on Consciousness. I would like to briefly introduce Swamiji to all of you. Swami Ishwarananda Ji is currently serving as a resident monk and spiritual guide from Chinmaya Mission, Los Angeles. He was initiated into Brahmacharya by His Holiness Swami Chinmayananda Ji in 1993. He was given Sannyasa Diksha in 2000 by Swami Tejo Mayananda Ji. And he has served as the Acharya Dean of Sandipani Sadhanalaya, Mumbai, to teach the 2-year Vedanta course for Brahmacharyans who study under his tutelage. He's a scholar par excellence, accomplished in Vedanta philosophy. He's known for his teachings, which are in a very simplified terms to audiences of different different mentalities and different orientations, and the spiritual teachings are conveyed in such a simple manner for easier implementation in day-to-day living. He's an accomplished writer as well. His discourses are marked with anecdotes and everyday examples. He has authored many books, many famous works such as Conscious Living, Silent Search, Life of I, Darkness of Light, Mindful Action, and Mindless Meditation. So with this brief introduction, I would like to begin the today's interview. Swamiji, before that, I would start a small prayer, invocation prayer. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha, Gurave Sarva Lokanam, Vishade Bhavaroginam, Nidhaye Sarva Vidyanam, Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Once again, my pranams to your holy feet, Swamiji. So, I would start this interview with the very first question would be about Pujya Swamiji's Purvashrama also. I sincerely seek an apology to start with the Purvashrama of Swamiji. So I would like to know how and why did Swamiji accept sannyasa? What made him to accept sannyasa? I would request this information from Swamiji.
Okay. As we all know, first of all, pranams to all of you, Hari Om. Sri Bhagavad Pada Acharya had very beautifully mentioned Bahunam Janmanamante Jnanavan Mam Pravatyate was said by Bhagavan Krishna. In the same way, Bhagavan Shankaracharya said, Jantunam Narajanna Durlabham Tapumsvam Tato Viprata Ityadi. Though I was not really looking for any spiritual guru or spiritual life, I would consider that as a Bahujanma Kritam Punyameva. It is not to be priding over that, but who knows what we did? Only when the Guru comes, we know that we did something. Nothing happens in this world by accident. As Bhagavan said, that many, many lives it is taking for a soul to find a Guru. But when the Guru himself is coming to you, without you asking for it, I consider it's a Bhagavan's grace. Manushyatvam, Mumukshutvam, Mahapurusha Samshraya. In these three, Mumukshutvam you one may have, Manushyatvam is somebody, some way or the other we got it. But Mahapurushanam Satsangaha Samshraya Ashrayaha Durlabhameva. And so, here we find that there is no doubt that there is grace of the Lord always working. I cannot in any way able to say I did something in this life to deserve to find a guru, to find interest in knowledge, and to find the interest in pursuing moksha marga, parama purushartha. I'm here to say that the scriptures are right, Bhagavan's words are right, and Bhagavad Pada's observation is also very, very true. And that is what I found in my life. I didn't look for anything. Yeah.
So that is a very pertinent observation which you have made. As they say, it is Ishwarad Anugraha Deva Pumsam Advaita Vasana. It is solely because of the grace of the Guru and Ishvara himself who comes in the form of Guru to us. So thank you for this answer, Swamiji. I'll move on to the next question. As I told in the introduction to our audience that Swamiji is with Chinmaya Mission. So what drove Swamiji towards Chinmaya Mission, and how did he actually get into the teachings of Swami Chinmayananda and that flow?
I was in Bangalore in the software field. And I had earlier, before coming to Bangalore, I was spending some brief time in Bombay with my uncle, who was an ardent devotee of Puja Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda. And he had a lot of audio tapes of Swami Chinmayananda, and he insisted that I should listen to it. At the time, I would probably was around mid-20s or early 20s. I had no interest in all these things, but anyway, I did not have any friends or anybody in a new place. So almost 8 to 10 hours, I used to listen to Swami Chinmayananda's lecture, audio lecture, mainly to understand his English more than anything else, because his vocabulary, his fluency, etc., attracted me more than the subject matter and the jokes, anecdotes. But somehow I took to him, this is a very interesting person. What he says is making sense. Then there was a period where I was totally cut off from that for almost 4 or 5 years before I reached Bangalore. One day I happened to see a banner which said that Swami Chinmayananda is in Bangalore speaking to youth. So then I was curious. I wanted to see him in person. I've not seen him in, physical form. I only heard him. During those times, the TV and then other media things were not that easily available. Videos are not available. So I went to his lecture. It is a gathering for the youth. There were around 200, 300 young people were there. And he was already 70 by that time. Even this was the year 90, I would say 84, 86, yeah. And throughout that entire 1 hour, hour and a half of lecture, he was standing and speaking. Very enthusiastic, laughing and jubilantly happy. So I was wondering, at this age, 70 years old, how could he be so happy? I mean, we think, at that time, I was thinking that 70 means almost you are ready to go. Lost interest in everything else. Everything other than eating and sleeping. But here is a person who was trying to conquer the world at 70. I was curious, what makes him do that? What is the secret behind that? So when they said that I can enroll myself into youth activities or study groups, etc., I enrolled myself. And then the following that, every Sunday we had a gathering of youngsters who started to study basics of Vedanta. And I started to get into that. A lot of interesting ideas very challenging logics written by him, a book called Manual of Self-Unfoldment. We had our center in Malleshwaram in Bangalore. Even now it's there. So that's where I used to go. And the interest grew over the years. And in 5 years' time, I found myself in Sandipani Sadhanalaya, Bombay as a student. And that's how I got into, in between, I took the position of a secretary of the Yogakendra, Chinmaya Yogakendra, it is called, in Bangalore, and that later on became secretary of Chinmaya Mission in Bangalore, working closely with Swami Brahmananda. And then I landed in Sandipani Sadhanalaya in 91. Yes.
Nice to know that, Swamiji. Yeah, like as you mentioned, Santipani Sadhanalaya, I would like to know what is taught and what are all the facets of Vedanta which is taught to students in Santipani Sadhanalaya.
Pujya Swami Chinmayananda started it in way back in the 60s when he came down from Uttarakashi, where he was with his guru, Swami Tapovanam. When he came to start giving public lectures, he found that there is a lot of interest in knowing about Hindu scriptures, but then there is no systematic study taking place for the youth who may be interested. And also he wanted to spread this knowledge to the maximum number of people. And that is possible only when he has more hands and legs, more people to do the same, not by himself. He was tirelessly working. So he decided to start an academy of Vedanta education. And he called it as Sandipani because Bhagavan Krishna himself learned from his guru Sandipani. So he called that as Sandipani, and it is also not only knowledge, but also sadhana kendra. And therefore he called Sadhanalaya. And there we have, when originally he started, he had more than 3 to 5 years of teaching because he was only teacher. And he had to go out and start his yajnas, jnana yajnas for a month or so and gather some donation, come back and conduct a month of class month of classes in Sandipani, and then again go back. He was doing that for so many years. So it was 3 to 5 years in the beginning stages. Later on, now it has become 2 years of program where all the chapters of Bhagavad Gita are covered with the Shankara Bhashya. And Upanishads, major Upanishads, 8 of them are covered out of 10. Isha, Kena, Kata, Mundaka, Mandukya, Taitreya, Aitreya, Prashna, and yeah. Except, Shvetashvatara, Brihadaranyaka, and Chandogya are not covered, but Kaivalya Upanishad covered instead of that. So that is not commented by Bhagavan Shankaracharya, but that is covered. So, and also Chatushutri of Brahma Sutra. Before that, to start with, they cover most of the Prakarana Granthas, like Tattva Bodha, Atma Bodha, Vivek Chodamani, Panchadashi, few chapters, and Sadhana Panchakam, and many others. So, and the evenings are satsangs with all the stotrams, and also parts of Tulsi Ramayana, Bhagavatam. Very tight program. In 2 years, they complete all this and make sure that the students have a good grip over Vedanta as well as Ramayana and Bhagavatam as well.
That is, I think, wholesome. Almost the whole Vedanta you're breaking down in small segments and putting it up across to seekers and disciples. That is something which we all must appreciate and find time. Of course, as I already mentioned that to our audience, that Swamiji was the dean of the Sadhanalaya for quite some time. So, Swamiji, in your days as the head of Sadhanalaya, that is when you were the dean, what sort of challenges did you face and how did you overcome these challenges?
The challenge is mainly uh, the interest level of the student should be kept very high, because they don't have anything else other than study there. No entertainment, nothing else. They cannot usually allowed to meet their family members, not to go out of the campus. We have a very strict rule that they should not be disturbed by anything else other than that they have to study. So it is quite challenging for the students to remain like that, because most of them had been in the busy world doing many things, and then they have come to learn this. Not all of them, not necessarily mumukshus, right? There can be 3-4 categories. Mumukshus may be there. There may be somebody who wanted to learn merely as a scholarly interest. That is also there. Some of them may be there because nothing else to do. So that is also there. So the challenge is more emotional. Their interest would wane away after some time. So this teacher has to keep the interest of the student growing, monitoring them, how they are learning, observing them closely, and make sure that um, uh, their interest is not waned away by um, you know taking into something else. Some of them may say, okay, I want to do some seva, some social work, this and that. I'm not interested in studies. Can I do that? No, here only to study. Later on, you do anything you want. um, that is the main challenge I have found. And uh, because I taught them for 2.5 years for a group of 60 students, the subject matter is the same, Brahma Vidya, but you have to come up with very creative ideas to keep the interest going. Every day there will be 3 to 4 lectures, though the various texts we take, but the subject matter is always the same. So it is necessary for the acharya of this course to always be enthusiastic and creative, different angles of views with which you have to present the subject. This is something expected of a teacher, apart from keeping very patient with the students, listening to them, understanding their concerns. So all those things are there.
That is indeed a challenge which you mentioned, Swamiji. I like, when you interact with students, the thing what I've noticed is it's easy to get drifted. Once you listen to students and their problems or such things, especially when you're having an institution totally dedicated only for the Vedanta as a subject, and Vedanta as a sadhana. So it also becomes a distraction for the guru, the adhyapaka, the teacher there, while mingling with the students. It could be a possibility. I don't tell that it always happens. So how would say a new teacher in sadhanalaya, how would he face? How should he overcome such an distraction from the disciples or such things? I'm sure that this is made a note before engaging someone as a teacher there, because it is not an regular academic job. It is the teacher himself is undergoes a rigorous training and sadhana and preparation before becoming a teacher.
Yeah, it usually is Acharya for the Sandipani is elected by the head of the mission, and he must have at least 10 years of sadhana might have done or more to become eligible to really teach. Not only a grip over the subject and a good full understanding of the method of teaching, and of course Sanskrit knowledge necessary, for communicating properly and understanding the Bhashya and translating it to their students. More than that, as you said, that steadfastness in what one does. And that is only by faith in Bhagavan and complete surrender to Guru. That I am here to continue my work as an offering to the lotus feet of the Guru, and with the grace of the Bhagavan, only it is possible. There is no ego about it, and any such problem of, as you said, the distractions that may probably would come in interacting with the students must be overcome by offering to the feet of the teacher, Gurudev, or and the Bhagavan say, you take care of it. How much ever I can do, I could do it, and beyond this, it's your, the grace that will help. Not to take too much into the heart the problems that they may come and get worried about it. To the extent one can do, help the student, the Acharya should do it. Then afterwards they said, okay, leave it to God.
That is okay, really enlightening. Actually, on the same notes, Swamiji, you also mentioned that the main challenge is to keep the disciples engaged and be a lot more creative while putting across Vedantic thoughts to disciples. So this is somewhere, I get this doubt in my mind that as Swamiji's are cut off from the society, at least they would prefer to be in isolation, not in. They are called Sarvasanga Parityagis and such. But how do you connect Vedantic thoughts to day-to-day life incidents and anecdotes? That is a very difficult task to achieve, very difficult goal which you can accomplish. It's not very easy because Swamiji's would have cut off themselves. So you would have cut off yourself from the society, the day-to-day happenings. But in spite of that, you're known for connecting the day-to-day activities to your students. How does Swamiji carry out this exchange, which might sound very dualistic to others, but as Swamiji, definitely I'm sure you will be finding oneness in this. So please share.
So you're asking whether it is during the Sandipani teaching or in regular now
regular discourses. Of course, even in Sandipani, if you have faced such this thing.
Yeah, in Sandipani, pretty much we to the subject matter, because that is not to be compromised at all. So we will have hardly time for anything else because the number of things to cover is so much. But in Sandipani, we not only train them to be very clear about the subject matter, Vedanta, as taught by Bhagavan Shankaracharya, but also related to the world. This happens only when we tell them that you are not only learning for yourself, but also for sharing with others. And others, what we mean by that is those who are not sannyasins, those who are grihasthas, those who are busily engaged in this world. And so we tell them that you must know how to make it as a practical teaching for people who are not necessarily serious students of Vedanta. But Bhagavan, Shankaracharya, whatever he has written for was for a serious students only, most of the time. But Swami Chinmayananda and such other masters who came to teach to the masses, they have given a lot of ideas in their commentaries. How to relate it to the world, day-to-day world. If you look at Swami Chinmayananda's Holy Gita, for example, he talks on various chapters as well as Upanishads, audio or video talks. He has brought in anecdotes and examples from day-to-day world, useful for common man to understand. But at the same time, not to over insist on sannyasatvam, sannyasa life to the grahasthas. You see, that is not possible anyways. Na buddhi vedam janayat ajnanam karma sangyanam joshayat sarva karmani vidwan yukta samachara. Not to unsettle the mind of the ignorant people who are connected to or attached to work, but at the same time, work with them and demonstrate to them what it means to be a person detached from the anxieties of the goal, but at the same time, putting best efforts to achieve anything that one does. Efficiency in action, at the same time, total dispassion over the results. This is Bhagavan Krishna has given in many places in Gita, Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu Mamanusmara Yudhyacha. Remember, but do your work. So, there are a lot of pointers in Gita, and especially Swami Chinmayananda's writings and talks. So, that they are very helpful. And the Swami Tejomayananda, the immediate past head of Chinmaya Mission Global, he has also given many beautiful lectures with practical ideas. And the present head, Swami Swarupananda, also is a person who has been, conveying this knowledge as practical as possible to the people. And these are the sources available for us to pick it up. And so the students are trained to not only understand the subject, but to relate it to the common man. So, and also they are slowly, as I can myself see, I start observing what is happening around me, even though not involved, but observation of what is going on is necessary for you to make it easy for common man to relate with this knowledge.
Yeah, on this slide where you told about the pointers in Bhagavad Gita towards the karma yoga and such things. Swamiji, how does one control desires, and in the light of Bhagavad Gita or all the teachings of Bhagavad Acharya, how does one control desires? This is a very common question put forth to our the audience, which audience puts forth this to us. So I would request the answer from Swamiji. So please shed light on this.
Yeah. So here, as it is said in one place in Mahabharata, Kama janami te moolam sankalpat kila jayase. Tado na sankalpayishyami tado tvam na bhavishyasi. Sankalpa is the cause or the very karana, the ketu for desire. Kama sankalpa jayate. So the point is that what is sankalpa? That sankalpa is the notion of happiness on things. If I have a notion this object or a person or a thing can give me joy, that very superimposition, adhyasa, is the cause for kama. Not all objects are desired by all people. And the same object also not desired by me at all times. So what is that which makes me get into such a trap? It is the notion that happiness is there out there. So what we have to work not with desire, with our notion of happiness. Why do we seek the happiness from things outside? It is because there is no inner contentment. There is void inside. There is no fulfillment. There is a certain amount of emptiness people feel. And to fill that emptiness, they need company of somebody else or company of objects or some name, position, power, recognition, respect, honor, everything. When do you become tulyaninda studirmoni santushto yena kenachit? Santushto yena kenachit. That is the point there. Tulyatvam is possible only when there is a santushti, contentment. If the contentment is lacking, if there is no feeling that I am full, I am complete, aham purnaha, iti jnanam yasya nasti, when that knowledge is not there, then you will look for purnatvam outside. So sankalpa is because of asantushti. You understand? So what is that which may make me full, complete? In knowing who I am. And there is an absence of knowing the Atma Anubhava is not there, Anandatma Anubhava is not there. Then there is obviously, there is emptiness, there is void, there is seeking for happiness. So the knowledge of the Atman, knowledge of the self in clarity, in clear terms, what it is. And so directly one cannot attack desire. Indirectly only we can. I met one Mahatma, one who said, desire is like a tree and it is fed by the earth called Ajnanam. The avidya that is there, which is actually supporting the tree called the desire. How will you cut how do you make the desire tree to destroy itself? You cannot cut it because its roots are very strong. You cut it on the top, it will again come back. Only thing you can do it is what makes the ajnanam sustain the desire. It's like a water that is there in the ground, which is picked up by the roots of the tree, and it starts to grow. And even if you cut off, if the water is there, the water is none other than the sambandha with the ajnanam, which is a constant association with that avidya. And that is sustained by the lack of satsanga. In other words, dussanga is the cause for ajnana to sustain. So long as I am in the company of people who do not pursue the jnanam, I get the wrong opposite of it about the world, about things that are important for others only becomes important to me also. When on the other hand, I go to the satsanga, then it slowly drains away. Sushke nire kaha samsaraha. Kaha kasaraha, sorry. Sushke nire kaha kasaraha. Where is the lake or water body when there is water is not there? Lake is not a lake without the water. Satsangatve nisangato. So constant association with the right thoughts, right people will make us get away from avidya. Water is drained out. Then the desire tree also will become parched and dry and die away. So merely cutting at the top without cutting the root. Suviruda moolam asanga shastrena dranena chitva. That's what Bhagavan said. It is so strong, you have to uproot it, and that is, and also make sure that it does not have any more water left there. Then only. So satsanga is important, and reason for that is gain the correct knowledge. Why correct knowledge? Because there is a feeling of emptiness, and the feeling of emptiness lead to seeking company outside, and seeking company leads to desire.
And that's a very good flowchart which you have given us, Swamiji. I think very important tool in Vedanta. This flowchart can act as a very important tool. Yeah, on this same line, Swamiji, apart from controlling desires, there are people who might give up on desires, but then their mind is still wavering with hallucinations and with there is some amount of fickle-mindedness among all sadhakas who approach to you, or who approaches any Swamiji for that matter. So how would one control mind while moving on the path of sadhana, and how to, apart from controlling desires, of course, as not adding, cutting off the water supply to the tree called desire, from the having the cutting off the relation with ajnana. What else needs to be done in the path of sadhana, of Atma sadhana, to achieve Atma Jnana or liberation? That is something which I would really want to know from you.
Samshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam. Abhyasana kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. Bhagavan also approached by Arjun by the same question. Chanchalam hi manat Krishna pramadi balavatradam tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriva sudushkara. There is definitely the chanchalatva of the mind is there. And that also is a major cause for not able to sustain the interest. So what we find is that unless one understands manaha kaha, what is called as manas? Because we consider that these manas, the mind is so true. Whatever it says, we never question. If a thought comes to my mind, I never question why this thought, or is this thought real? We take it so seriously. Why do you take your mind so seriously? Manasam tikim margane kride naiva manasam marga arjavat. Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi observed it clearly. Of course, it is said in various places in Upanishads also, but the understanding of the mind is very important. With the mind as real, I'm telling you, with the mind as real, one cannot proceed further. Not possible at all. Mind is to be understood as false. And so long as we take the mind to be true and whatever it does as true, then there is a lot of struggle with that because it doesn't listen to us. Thoughts are not created by you. None of us create our own thoughts. They happen and we follow, which is very, 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 very dangerous. In the Western world of psychiatry, Western psychiatry psychologists, they take the mind to be true and then try to correct it. Whereas Vedanta says, my mind is not to be taken too seriously. Though it is said that manasa eva aptavyam, that manaha is almost amana only. It is almost not there. So the understanding about the mind is very important, and that is only possible when a sadhaka starts to go deep within oneself. What is vritti? What is manaha? How the vritti starts? Where is the source of the vritti? So study is very important, and merely following some external rituals and a few other things can give you a temporary satisfaction of calmness and quietness, etc. But to really get out of samsara, really get out of the external bondage, one has to go deeper into oneself. It is like a ship in the main ocean is able to steadily move because of the depth. If the depth of the ship, it is not properly, or even standing in the shores of ocean, it will easily topple if the anchor is not properly placed. In the same way, deeper understanding of oneself, about one's mind, is very important for one to face the challenges of outside. What I mean by that is that that's why Bhagavan has said abhyasa. What abhyasa? Jnana abhyasa, not anything else. Abhyasena vairagyena cha grihyate manaha. So one has to hold the mind only with the help of viveka vairagya. That is important. At the same time, one should independently start thinking about what makes my mind what it is. Where are the thoughts sourced from? How are the vasanas working? Even if I turn away myself from the world is not going to leave me for easily. After some time, it will come back. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina rasavarcham rasopyasya param drishtva eva nivartate. So param drishti, atma drishti is what is going to really help us live in this world, but not live as dictated by the world. So question the reality of the mind.
Oh, that is again a wonderful thought which you have given us, questioning the reality of mind. Because, as you said, most of the Western approaches to psychology assumes mind to be an entity, real entity, and then progresses with that, as you said. And the Vedanta Shastra is diametrically opposite, telling that mind itself is unreal. And so it is understanding the nature of mind is also something which you advise us and your disciples. That's something which I think the audience will be happy to know, or at least happy to progress on that path. Swamiji, on this line, you mentioned about, of course, your days in Sadhanalaya. Apart from that, now as a monk, as a Swamiji, what are some texts which Swamiji prefers to teach beginners? Some basic texts which Swamiji would advise as a general purpose reading for Vedanta, who develops initial seeds of Vedantic thoughts. What sort of text would Swamiji recommend and advise?
It depends upon how much of Shastra one knows or one has faith in. For people who are totally new to the subject matter, for them, the writings of Mahatmas are very important. Whether it is Swami Vivekananda's complete works or Swami Chinmayananda has written small and big lot of books like, as I said, Self-Unfoldment and Kindle Life, etc. Mahatma's writings are very important. Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and I Am That by Nisargadatta Maharaj. These are all for the people who want to start off. That is important because they don't even know. First of all, they are not aware of the terminologies. What is Atman? What is Brahman? That also they do not know. But more than that, why do we even take up to spiritual life? What is the reason we should move into this path? And what is wrong with the way I am living? Many people say that nothing wrong with what is going on in my life. They are totally convinced that all are fine, everything is fine. There's no need for all this. So to such people who are skeptic or agnostic or atheist, there is a need for them to, first of all, to understand the higher purpose of life. And what they have taken for granted is not right. And what they do not know is available to them to know, realize. So the initial conviction, the first step is to get to know what needs to be known. That introduction is crucial. First itself, we cannot start Tattva Bodha, Atma Bodha, because that it starts with definitions. The basics have to be understood. So Mahatmas have written a lot of places we find, a lot of books are available. And that is the initial set of texts that I would recommend to people. Then proceed with the serious text, whether it is Panchadashi, Vivek Chodamani, Tattva Bodha, Atma Bodha, Sadhana Panchakam, Bhajagovindam. Bhajagovindam is a really good text to start with before even going to Tattva Bodha, because that directly addresses a common man. What are you holding on to? Once the basic texts are done to some extent, then proceed on with introduction to chapter of Gita, chapter 1 to start with, where we understand the human condition, the confusions that are there. And then chapter 2 will be a very good, Bhagavad Gita will be a very good introduction to Upanishads. Because Siddha Prakshana Lakshanani, that will really baffle an individual. How can a person of that kind can be? Then he understands the mind of a student, what a student should be. Because Siddhasya Lakshanani Sadhagasya Sadhanani. I need to understand what I qualify for. How do I qualify? Then the introduction of the Viveka, Vairagya, Shat Sampatti, etc., as it is said in Tattvabodha and Panchadashi, chapter 1, that will make sense. So parallelly, Upanishads, Gita would help an individual. That is how we teach in Sandipani. Start with the basic texts, go on, parallelly running Upanishad and Gita, so that they will connect the dots by themselves. So, yes.
Yeah, so starting with the texts authored by Mahatmans and then proceeding to minor works and Laghu Prakaranas such as Bhaja Govindam maybe and Sadhana Panchakam, Swamiji advises us to proceed then to other more bigger and complex works and then proceed to Upanishad. And prior to that, Bhagavad Gita, Bhashya of the first and second chapters, and then Upanishad. This is what Swamiji advises us. Thank you, Swamiji. And on this note, I would like to tell our audience that Swamiji's works itself, they're quite famous: Conscious Living, Life of I, etc. Swamiji, can you brief us about some of your works and what exactly you deal with them and deal in those books? So can you just throw some light?
Yes.
Because that is also a Mahatman's book for us beginners like us.
Yeah. So, Life of I is a very interesting book to read. It's a story of a person who lost interest in life. And so he was ready to end his life. Fortunately, he was saved um, by the statement that he happened to suddenly hear, and that is, as said in the book, Swami Chinmayananda said, "What you have is his gift. What you do with what you have is your gift to him." This statement really shocks him, rocks his mind. What I have is his gift. What I have is life, and Bhagavan's gift it is. And what do I do with my life is my offering back to him. That means what I received as a gift is something is not asked for. What is a gift? You ask for and somebody gives you, it's not a gift. Unasked, I am given this great opportunity of being a human. And what am I doing with this? So he suddenly stops everything. What am I? Why am I ending this life? Then he was guided by various other characters in that story. And finally, he becomes a mumukshu and reaches the highest point. The entire story is about a life of ego, I. He starts with a question that why should I live in this world? And to end with is that the greatest statement that is there any I at all? That I ends at that point. The story is about the journey, as I said. That took me quite some time to put together the ideas that can help a common man to understand the imports of the Upanishads, Gita, and slowly unfold oneself to the highest. Conscious living, on the other hand, are thoughts about various ways of thoughts about the self from various angles, from various practical angles, how to sustain yourself on the abidance in the self, how the circumstances will be of different kinds, and one should go back to the abidance in the self. That is, and then the mindful work and mindless meditation, how important it is to keep our mind in place while working, and how it is important at the same time to get rid of the mind in meditation. It is important while at work, but not at all important while you are with yourself. So that dichotomy has to be understood. That is the concept in that book. Darkness to light is 108 names of Swami Chinmayananda, which we chant while offering or doing Paduka Puja for Swami Chinmayananda. So those 108 names are 108 pointers. So over a period of time, I gave 108 satsangs on the names, and that was collected and put it as darkness to light, asatoma sadgamaya, that idea, tamasoma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma mritangamaya. So from a darkness of ignorance we can move towards the light of knowledge. So those are the books. So yeah, it will definitely be helpful for common man. Yeah.
So definitely, I would love reading them. Swamiji has blessed us with these works. Swamiji, another quick question on because currently Swamiji is heading in the in United States in Los Angeles. Swamiji, what sort of challenges do you face while dealing with disciples who are based out in US or abroad, Western world, who pardon me if I'm wrong, but if their upbringing culture is different from the Indian disciples. So, what sort of challenges, if at all, Swamiji has faced, and how does Swamiji fine tune his teachings to put across the same Vedantic thought, which can be for an Indian disciple who's at least has a very an armchair knowledge of Ramayana, Bhagavatam, maybe, which is absent maybe in the Western uh, the disciple crowd. So how would Swamiji fine tune his teachings for the Western crowd? Is which I wanted to ask.
When you say Western crowd, most of the members of the Chinmaya mission here are Indians only. There are some people who are from the Caucasians and others. In fact, the Indians who have migrated here, they are the mainstream members of Chinmaya mission here. So their upbringing definitely is a little from the India only. But at the same time, we do have second generation of Indians also, because we have a large population of youngsters who are learning from our centers in Balavihars and Yuva Kendras. They are born, brought up here. What we find is that this is definitely, you should know, all of you should know, when they take up something, they're very serious about it. They don't spend time if they find it is not useful to them. It is not out of force or pressure that they come to learn. They want to learn. Because they do not want to, they are very conscious about what the time they are spending on. That is the culture here. Nobody wants to waste time. In work also, they are very particular about completing the task in time. Nobody wants to waste time with doing nothing. Most of them are very conscious about that. So when they come to the class, they are very particular that they spend that 1 hour, an hour and a half with a serious understanding, discussion, etc. I find it that very different from what I have observed back in India. Most of the people come to satsang because there's nothing else to do at home. Or they would say, okay, I'm here just to listen. And by just listening, something will happen. And they have faith in just listening, just being in the company of some gurus and mahatmas, something will happen to me. That attitude is not here. When they are here, they really want to take the best out of that moment. So that is interesting. First, I found it, and I couldn't believe that these people are so interested, while there are so many other distractions are there for them. How are they interested in, when somebody, our Swami Tejomanji was asked when he was touring here or touring in India, Somebody asked Swamiji, why is it that there are few people for satsanga while there are so many people go to some movies and entertainment and other things? How is that very few people are there in satsanga? Swami Tejomanand very jocularly, he said that, I'm wondering why even these people are here. So I am only wondering about what about these people? Why are they here? So there are so many distractions that are possible. There are video games, there are movies coming out every day, and now you have internet and many other things. In spite of all that, if they are interested to learn, that shows that there is something in them which is directing them to come to satsanga. Now, we are here to kindle that interest. We are here to make sure that they maintain that. We are here to assure that what they are doing is right, and they have the required qualification to move further, and they need to do more things that we guide them in doing. There are challenges, of course, of job uncertainty and all is more here, because the fact that anybody can be fired anytime, it is no assurance that you will have your job all the time. If you don't prove yourself, you're out. So there are challenges at workplace for them. There are a lot of pressure, but they still feel that they will be helped a lot by this knowledge, and they have a higher purpose in life to work for, and that really is what the kind of audience we have here.
That's indeed no, great thing to know that our own Western brethren are more honest while seeking knowledge, which is something expected out of any disciple of any discipline for that matter, especially in Vedanta, as Swamiji will himself certify. It is really nice, no, something, of course, surprising for maybe some of them, but I am really happy to know that their dedication, their Vyavasayatmika Buddhi is helping them progress in Vedanta. So in this, I think we are coming to the last end of our interview with Pujya Swamiji. Swamiji, what is your final advice to sincere seekers amongst us? What would you advise? This is totally your own advice, which you would give to any disciple who approaches to you. Before asking this question, I once again do my humble Sashtanga pranams to you and request this answer reply from you.
I am in no position to give advice, really speaking. We are all here in the same path. We are all were at different levels or different stages of the journey. Some may be in the front, some may be in the back. And again, that is all not to be taken as any kind of disqualification. The circumstances are like that. Sometimes one may be very eager to proceed, but family situations, etc., may not allow a person to do so, or health, maybe, or economic condition. Some may be able to move further easily. That is also there. Anyway, so the only thing that we need to keep in mind is nobody is deprived of this. Everybody is qualified to be liberated. It is our birthright. How much effort we can put entirely depends upon individuals. We have to make choices in everyday life. Shreyascha preyascha manushyametah tausam paritya vivinati dhiraha. Dhiratvam is in viveka. Dhiratvam is able to clearly see what is Shreyas and what is prayers. And we easily succumb to prayers because it's easily available and immediately satisfying. But Shreyas, on the other hand, Shreyas being the good, the ultimate, and Shreyas prayers is immediate pleasure and satisfaction. Those who do not know the terms as such. So the Shreyas, the ultimate good, He's always there for us to choose. But when we are occupied with immediate pressures, etc., we lose the sight of it. So be alert. Swami Chinmayananda said, alert and vigilant living is spirituality. Nothing should be taken for granted. Nothing happens on its own. Only thing that happens on its own is you getting aged. You don't need to do anything. But if at all anything need to be done for us to move ahead, it has to be done consciously. It has to be done with attention. And it is not be a part of your life once in a while you do. Consistently to be done. It's like breathing. You don't do once in a while. You do it. It has to be done. Similarly, progress in life, progress in spiritual life is not a chance. It's a choice. We have to take it seriously and do it in every occasion of opportunity when we have to make certain choices. When do you get up? What do you do after you get up? How do you deal with people? What kind of thoughts will make you move forward? What are the thoughts which can disappoint you, discourage you? What kind of people you deal with? What kind of books you read? What kind of food you eat? What kind of news you hear? What kind of places you go? It is said beautifully in Amsa Gita also. That's a book in Bharata Bhagavatam you should read. How these are all can be changed. Anyway, the point that we need to keep in mind is we have choices and we have to make the right choice. And the right choice can be understood by me only when I am in satsanga. I must have the constant association with the right source of knowledge, and that I should continue to pursue either in person or by reading the books or listening to the talks over audio or video. Constantly engage in getting new thoughts from right sources, which will help you to have the steadfastness in moving forward.
Thank you for your golden words of advice, Swamiji. Swamiji has highlighted on satsanga, the importance of satsanga, the desire tree, how the mind in itself is not real, and how Swamiji has put forth the requirement of steadfastness and being earnest while seeking Atmajnana. And also how he has given us a beautiful flowchart on controlling desires, so that we progress in the path of sadhana. Swamiji has also given us a few steps of a few books in different steps, sopanam, if I can put it, for various levels of seekers in spirituality. So this is a wonderful session which we had with the blessings of Swamiji. We thank Swamiji once again. Myself, Abhinand, I do my pranams to you once again, and my co-host and colleague Sri Manu Kashyapji also offers his pranams to you. Thank you for this session, Swamiji. We really look forward to work on your advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share.
With academics.
Hari Om. Yes.
Hari Om. Dhanyavada.
Dhanyavada.